achieve this, we obviously collaborate with others to explore, envision, and share ways to do this work. And today we're really excited to hear from Gordon Nuttall about the Electrify project of our energy committee, started by Dwayne Edgar, who's sitting in tonight, incognito, but here. And Gordon's a big part of that now. And Dan will be the person to introduce Gordon and to moderate. There are different ways these are done. We'll find out how this one will go, but we always do like conversation. I think Gordon enjoys conversation as well. So I'm going to go on video for a while, so I won't distract you while I do my evening exercises or something like that. But I'm listening and glad to see everybody here.
All right. Thank you, Stuart. Yes, I am Dan Stormont. I'm with the Water Committee of Sustainable Tucson. I'm also the chair of the City of Tucson Commission on Climate, Energy, and Sustainability. So I kind of have a connection to Gordon's topic for tonight. So I'm really looking forward to this. Also, Dwayne, it's great seeing you. I haven't seen you in a bit. Um, I will ask everyone to please mute yourselves during the presentation. Gordon has asked for us to save the questions until the end. So if you have a question, just go ahead and put it in the chat so we don't forget it. That way when the question comes up, you'll remember it and put it in the chat. I will start with the questions from the chat when we get to the end of the presentation. And then, of course, we should have time for you to be able to unmute and ask your question as well if you have a question that comes up after that. We also will have community announcements. They will be at the end of the presentation as well. I'm going to just briefly read Gordon's bio, and then we're going to let him speak. So um, Gordon is with GoElectricAZ. He says, after many years as an entrepreneur and small business owner, I retired and made Tucson my home in 2020. I'm involved with GoElectricAZ because of my desire to combat climate change. I think it is urgent to avoid installing new, long-lived fossil fuel infrastructure that will make us fall even further behind. It's satisfying to know that one is helping lead directly to a tangible reduction in a household's emissions. I also find it satisfying to feel that I'm able to help out a neighbor. I know that figuring out what to do with one's home can be confusing and stressful. I have appreciated the help I've received from others in the past who have provided me with clear, unbiased information and would like to pay that forward. So, Gordon, go ahead and take it away. And again, I ask everyone to please mute your microphones. If not, I will do it for you. So, just a heads up.
Well, thanks, Dan, for the introduction. And I'm going to share my screen and just get right in to the presentation, if you don't mind. Appreciate everybody's time being here tonight. And hopefully this will be an interesting conversation once we get through the discussion. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So thank you, Joanna, for this cute graphic showing a home that's been electrified. Both the heat pumps, electric heat pump, water heater, stove tops, solar on the roof. That's where we're headed. But today we'd like to be able to say everything that you wanted to know about electrification, but didn't know who to ask. And I want to introduce our group of Sustainable Tucson. We are, as you mentioned, that we are a part of the Energy Transformation Working Group. Oh, that's a mouthful. And so we settled in on this name of Go Electric Arizona. There are other organizations in other states called Go Electric Colorado and Go Electric California. So we're kind of tagging on with that moniker to help people understand what we'd like to be able to help them do through community education, events like today, and we have another one coming up at Oro Valley. We do things for homeowners associations and libraries, those kinds of in-person presentations about electrification. But we hope to be able to help people navigate this confusing world. The electrical panels and solar batteries, tax credits, utility rebates, financing. There's a lot to get your mind wrapped around. And hopefully by providing a unbiased coaching service, we can help walk people through that whole process. And also our website there is goelectricaz.org. Well, how do we go from this, where we're pumping everything out of the ground to burn and releasing hydrocarbons into the atmosphere, affecting our climate, to this, where we have solar or other renewable sources on homes that are primarily, almost always, using electricity for their usage around the house? Well, how do we get there? There's five big decisions that I think really matter. How we cook our food, where our electricity comes from, how we cool and heat our homes, how we heat our water, and how we get around town. And I'll talk about all five of those in our talk tonight. Well, where are the biggest impacts? Well, cars, that's a large part of the overall energy use. Transportation is a big deal. Also, in the residential category, you see that, which is 30%, surprisingly, of the overall energy usage in the United States. That number was bigger than I thought. I've always thought about energy usage being big factories and power plants and those kinds of things. But residential makes up a significant percentage, which means that collectively, we all making small changes within our homes can make an overall big impact on the overall energy use. Of that 30% residential, about 60% comes from heating and cooling. Another surprising fact that I learned as a part of this research, heating our hot water is about 17%, and all the others, clothes drying and others, 20 to 22%. So let's focus in on our central air, the heating and cooling of the home, heating our water, and the vehicles that we drive. And our first suggestion here is make a plan. Be proactive. Don't wait until something fails and then your replacement becomes urgent. I had a friend who left for a couple of weeks in the summertime on vacation, and during that time, their air conditioner failed. And when they came back, it was urgent. It was over 100 degrees, and they just had to take the first bid that came along that somebody was able to get out there in a couple of days. So, if you've made a plan and you've been proactive, you won't be caught with your pants down if something unfortunate like that happens to you. And our first recommendation for making a plan is to get a home energy audit. It can improve the health and safety because it'll identify those sources of air quality like carbon monoxide that's leaking from your appliances and poor ventilation, and recommend some solutions to those things. It'll recommend some changes that you can make for comfort, because many of us, our homes are too drafty in one place and too hot or cold in another place. Maybe they have odors and issues because they aren't getting adequate air circulation. An energy audit will help you identify those underlying issues also. And also, they will measure the places where you may be losing energy. Your energy efficiency in terms of sealing and insulation save you a lot of money by just not wasting all of the energy that you use. There is a free energy audit available from TEP, which is okay. It gets you started, and you can access that from calling that number there, 866-473-8761. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Well, what is an energy audit? What do they include there? Well, the first would be the insulation inspection. So looking at your insulation, you don't want all of your cooling escaping through gaps in your insulation. Likewise, an envelope test will find out how tightly your home is sealed. There's an instrument called a thermal imaging, I call it a gun, I guess, but you can point it to areas of the home which show temperature differences, and that will tell you then where air leakage is occurring. A duct test will measure the leakage from the ductwork on a central air system, and you don't want to waste that cool air that's traveling down the ducts to the outside also. So there's a technique to use to seal your ducts to reduce the leakage from the ductwork. A manual J calculation goes through your entire house, measuring things like windows, size of windows, types of windows, area of the windows, the doors and walls, and will calculate the proper size of an HVAC system. And this is really important when we get into the details of a heat pump system for your home, you don't want to oversize or undersize your tonnage, what is called tonnage. So you might know that your current air conditioning compressor is 4 ton or 3 ton. It's really important to properly size your heat pump system to get the best operation out of it. For those appliances that use combustion, the natural gas, the carbon monoxide and the gas levels that are emitted there have been shown to cause problems with health, particularly in children and asthma. So we don't want your house to be polluted with carbon monoxide because of stove and maybe even your heater because of carbon monoxide. And lastly, an energy audit will take a look at your past months, several years maybe, of your energy bills and find out what goes up and what goes down in different types of years, and then how you can mitigate some of those costs by doing some of these home improvements. So I might ask the question, envelope test, what is that thing in the door? That's a blower door test. The auditor will open your door and replace it with this large panel with a large fan in the bottom, and it'll blow air into your house, and then they can go around your house and monitor where air is escaping. It's a very clever test and effective at identifying all those areas you might not have thought about when you're just looking around to see places that you might be losing air. And the other instrument that will be used there is that IR device, which finds spots where the temperatures differ and can use that to measure how much air leakage is going through those gaps. Another test that can be run by the auditor is a duct test and the sealing that would go with it. So the first thing they do is they clean out the ducts, and then they will block and seal the exits and pump air into the ducts from the furnace or from your air conditioning, and you measure the leaks from the ducts. It takes most of a day to run this test, and also it will measure these leakage into the vents into the room. And that's where I found in my home where I could get the most bang for the buck, because the vents, the tin, when it met the walls and vented into the house, were big gaps. Back in the day when they built my house, they weren't so concerned about air sealing of the ducts, and so all I had to do is put a little of that expanded duct stuff around the edges, and it sealed those vents as they entered into the room. That's one of those things that you would find from a duct test. The way to mitigate that is to do sealing of the ducts. There is a process that is an aeroseal that's pumped through the duct for a couple of hours. And the leakage is again measured in it. I compare this to the stop a flat stuff that you put in your tires. It kind of migrates this aeroseal to those gaps and solidifies it in the gaps. Very handy test for reducing the amount of air you're losing through your ducts. Well, the next step in your plan, of course, is going to be, well, use the results from the audit to weatherize. Do those air sealing and insulation points that were measured through the audit. Single pane windows, I imagine most of us have already done that, but many of the older homes in town still have single pane windows, which are horrendous for losing cool air to the exterior. If you have any exterior doors that don't have good insulation, those oftentimes will pay for themselves quickly by being replaced. And again, the idea about doing some duct sealing is one of those options for weatherizing your home. For air sealing and insulation, there's going to be those infiltrations that you can see and increasing the insulation. Many of our attics, especially those flat or slightly sloped homes in the older parts of town, the attics just don't have a lot of insulation. And they're fairly difficult to get insulation in there, but we have some techniques that would help you make the best use of your money in insulating your wall and attic. Obviously, you want to caulk any windows that are cracked where the insulation is cracked. Weather stripping the doors, the threshold is a notorious waste of air for many people. Baseboards where they meet the flooring is oftentimes a larger gap there. Again, because the construction techniques back in the day weren't as concerned about air leakage. One that is overlooked, I think, is the electrical outlets that you have on your exterior walls. Many of those have these open boxes that you can see there. Um, and air is just, going to go right through most of those. They make cover plates for those electrical outlets that have just a little bit of insulation. They seal up nice and tight against the drywall and will reduce your airflow through those outlets to a great degree. And another one that I was surprised about in my home was the canister lights in the ceiling. When we took the covers off of those and looked at it, there was at least as big a gap around that as what's shown there with that electrical outlet. And they're easy to replace because they make these LED snap-in units that plug right into the circular bulb socket that's already there. And they seal up nice and tight against the ceiling drywall. Made a big difference in my home just by going online and buying. I bought, I think, 20 of them, and a huge improvement in the amount of air that I was losing through the roof and those canister lights. The next thing is about being proactive. Don't wait for the failure. As I mentioned again earlier, your gas furnace typically has a 20-year life. Replace it with a heat pump. You get double duty with a heat pump by being both a furnace and also an air conditioner. And we'll talk about that some more later on. But if you're in a home that has 20 years, maybe even more on your existing air conditioning and furnace, uh, start thinking about getting some bids on replacing those with a heat pump so that you're ready to go later on. Now, your water heater is typically an 8 to 10 year life. Replace that also with a heat pump water heater. And again, it takes a little pre-planning for that because of maybe the electrical circuitry requirements for a heat pump water heater and also the location and size. So again, start doing your homework now so that you don't have to be hurrying around later on. Well, I've talked a couple of times about a heat pump, and you say, really? A heat pump in Tucson? I need cooling. I don't need heat. Well, heat pumps are absolutely great for cooling houses. They're actually more energy efficient than the other systems that you might have. Certainly, they reduce emissions because they can do both a furnace function of heating your home and also cooling. They really give a really nice year-round comfort. With our current air conditioning and furnace systems, many of them are a single speed fan. So when it calls for heating or cooling, the fan kicks on, you hear a big whoosh of air coming out of the ducts, and you hear the noise, and it'll raise the temperature a couple of degrees and then it'll turn off and it'll sit for maybe half an hour and then turn back on again. It's this on, off, which is really quite unpleasant. Whereas heat pumps are variable and will vary the amount of temperature difference. The temperature difference will vary less with the heat pump. And it's a whole lot quieter and also, of course, safer and healthier by reducing that carbon monoxide emissions. And mini splits are a type of a heat pump. Those are the wall-mounted units that oftentimes are just controlled in one room. So if you have rooms that are notoriously hot, just can't cool them with the central air. Maybe they're facing towards the west or they're on the end of the ductwork, so they get what's left after all the other rooms are filled with cool air. A mini split is easier to install, reasonably priced, and will give you that desired temperature in those individual rooms that are really difficult to attain with a central air system. Well, I've talked about it. What is a heat pump? Well, you might guess by the name that a pump, a heat pump moves heat either from a cooler place to a warmer place or reverse. So think about a refrigerator. It's taking hot air from the inside of the refrigerator and exhausting it or moving it to the air in the room, usually with the compressor that's in the bottom of the refrigerator. But heat pumps are available for heating your home and cooling your home, hot water for clothes drying, and also for heating your pool. So in the winter, the air source heat pump moves heat from the cooler outdoors to the warmer indoors, and in the summer, it moves heat from the cooler indoors to the warmer outdoors. Now, what's really cool about a heat pump is it is not generating heat on its own. You aren't spending money on the electrical grid or for natural gas to be generating heat. Heat pumps are so efficient because they just move it from one place to another using the minimal amount of electricity required to run the refrigerant back and forth. And you might ask, well, how does that heat source heat pump work? In the heating mode, you've got step one, which is the indoor air is cooled. The refrigerant inside the coil is really cold. A blower pulls warm air from your house across that cold coil, and that is then called the evaporator. Heat transfers from the air into that refrigerant, and the air leaving the coil is now, 15, maybe 20 degrees cooler than what is blown back into your home. The refrigerant then is step two, carries the heat outside. Now, as it absorbs heat, the refrigerant changes from a cold liquid into a warm gas, and the compressor pumps this warm gas to that outdoor unit. The outdoor unit in step three releases the heat because the compressor has increased the refrigerant's pressure, making it even hotter. The outdoor fan blows outside air around the outdoor coil, and because the refrigerant is hotter than the outside air, heat flows to the outdoors. The refrigerant then cools and condenses back to a liquid. And finally, to complete the cycle, the refrigerant cools again when it goes through an expansion valve, which pressure drops suddenly and becomes very cold, which then returns back to that inside coil. Pretty cool. But in the heating mode, all you have to do is change the direction of the reversing valve, and the outdoor coil then becomes the evaporator, absorbing heat from the outside air, and the indoor coil becomes a condenser, moving that heat back into your home. So it's a two for one. You can't beat that. It's going to be so convenient for you to be able to do that. Even if in Tucson you got a hot Tucson day, 105, 110 degrees, the refrigerant from the compressor is still going to be well above that. And it's sufficient to be able to actually put more heat to the outside. It's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? You're thinking, how am I going to pump hot air into the outdoors when it's already 110 degrees? And I guess that's the magic of physics and refrigerants. And likewise, the people up in the Northeast, when they're worried about how am I going to take heat from temperature outside that's 10 degrees Fahrenheit and actually use that heat to heat my house? And well, that's the way the physics works. That's really very cool. The other way that you can use the heat pump technology is in your water heater. Well, the same thing kind of happens, except the compressor is built into the top of the tank. In most of our electric and even gas-fired hot water heaters, the heating element is on the bottom. But in this case, with the heat pump water heater, it's going to transfer the heat from the surrounding air instead of creating it, which is really cool because if you put this in your garage, it will be extracting heat from the garage to heat the water, which means it's going to be cooling off your garage. It's really much more efficient than trying to, light a fire or with propane or with the electricity. But a heat pump water heater will last a whole lot longer than a traditional water heater. Saves a couple $100 a year, depending on how many people you have in your household and your water use. So it's really great. And then, of course, when you pair that with a solar on your roof or 100% renewable sources, which hopefully we can get TEP to do a little bit more in that area. Well, a lot more in that area. It reduces zero emissions. Everything is just moving heat from one place to the next extremely efficiently. One thing to consider with your heat pump water heater is where to locate it. It probably needs about 1,000 cubic feet of airspace, in your garage, utility room, furnace room, storage room. Many people have their current water heaters in a small closet, and they can be vented or use a louvered door to reduce the amount of size that it requires. I believe that most of the 110 volt units are sufficient, and you may not need to have that backup heating element that is really suitable more for homes that have, I don't know, 4 or 5 kids going to school in the morning, all of them wanting to get a shower before they catch the bus. A heat pump water heater to meet that kind of demand would maybe need that backup heating element. And it does need a water drain hose because the air passing over the evaporator on the top of the water heater is going to remove heat. It also decreases humidity, which means it's going to have condensation around those fins up there. So it does need a place to drain water to the outside if you're using a heat pump water heater, such as in a closet or some other enclosed area. And the other thing to consider with the heat pump water heater, they do produce a small amount of noise, similar to a refrigerator. And so if that closet is adjacent to your master bedroom or where you're going to be sleeping at night, it may not be the best choice unless you do other things. I've got a CPAP, and so the noise from that would certainly be greater than the sound coming from a heat pump water heater. Okay, other types of appliances. For example, your stove or your range. You can either replace your gas-fired stove and uh, oven with an electrical resistance or an induction. And the induction stovetops are great. I think most people know that it vibrates the pot, iron atoms with magnetic field lines and causes heat to build up in the pot. So it's really, really efficient. Awesome. It avoids all of those issues that have to do with gas stoves. And I know many cooks swear by their gas stoves, but more and more people are saying the induction is definitely the way to go, even for gourmet cooking. If you want to try it out, just start with one of the hot plates. They're pretty efficient. They sit on a tabletop or on your countertop. Give it a try. I think you'd like it. They also offer this really better fine temperature control and, of course, the safety of not having flames going in your kitchen. Now, an induction ranges oven does not cook with induction. It's going to still be an electrical element, or hopefully that's what you do is get a range that has a electrical element for the oven and an induction for the cooktop. Other types of appliances you can electrify with that might be fueled by fossil fuels now is the combination of a washer and a heat pump dryer. Now these are really kind of cool because they have the same, what do you call it, a drum? You put the clothes in there and they fill it with water, hot water that's created by the heat pump, and then it'll empty the water, and then it'll kick the heat pump into dryer mode and dry the clothes without you having to go in there and move them from one place to the next. Pretty darn cool. And good space saver also. You can also buy heat pump dryers that are stackable and very efficient that way, and also the standalones. Landscaping tools, it's amazing how much pollution we generate from our yard tools. Now, we don't have that much for lawnmowers, but those blowers, those things are really not only noisy as all get out, but they are polluters like you wouldn't believe. Sustainable Tucson has a sweep program that fills you in on that, and you can turn in your gas tools and replace them with the electrical versions with the program available from Pima County. Next step of your plan, long term, when you can, if you haven't already, buy an EV. They are so darn fun. And it's great to drive by gas stations, and you don't have to worry about what the gas price is going up or down for one reason or another. It's very convenient to charge at home. You don't have emissions tests, tune-ups, plugs, belts, air filter, oil change, all of those stuff that you would have with a combustion engine. And you can check for with TEP on discounts for their home EV chargers, and particularly those that are going to be smart that you can program and even program remotely to charge at certain times of day. And combined with your solar, you can be really very efficient with time of use or battery backup to get the best use of your solar array for charging your EV. And the number of EV models are increasing all the time. And the used models, I think, are getting some really great values in that $30,000 price range. And another thing to consider when you can is a energy monitoring system. And what that does is it installs in your panel and it'll let you know which electrical circuits are using the most energy and when. And I found this really helpful for my home. I installed one of these Emporia View 3 systems that had 8 circuits, costs $150, and had somebody come out and install it. And using an app, you can see where all of your energy usage is going. So the obvious ones are, of course, your air conditioning and the fan that drives that system. Also, we had a mini split, so I could compare how efficient my mini split was to the furnace fan. I'm sorry, the air conditioning fan. And but I was amazed at how much other things were taking and how I could reduce those. For example, I had a pump that was in the small pond in the back, and it's a really fairly large pump. And I didn't need it running 24 by 7. I now, just turn it on when I'm out there and turn it off when I'm not. And I was quite surprised overall on how much motors take on your electrical usage. And by having one of these monitoring systems, you can find out what's going on with your home and then make changes to your usage that will reduce your bills quite a bit. Another thing I found to be handy was that it's accessible from the internet. And when I'm traveling, I can monitor how much energy is being used in certain areas. And if something goes up suddenly, I give my neighbor a call and say, hey, could you go check things out? I'm not sure what's going on there. So it's a great way to keep track of what's being used in your system and take corrective action if you need to. And then, of course, if you haven't already done this also, when you can, go ahead with the solar on the rooftop and batteries. The panel prices have declined dramatically. Many people are using batteries for protection against the blackouts and to reduce your reliance on TEP. Batteries are still kind of expensive, but decreasing in price, so keep an eye on that. And our team at GoElectric Arizona have developed a calculator that is specific to Tucson to help with the ROI numbers. Many of the calculators that you go online and they'll have them do an estimate on how many years it takes to pay back. Uh, they're kind of generalized, kind of a big picture. There's a lot of individual factors in our environment in Tucson and Phoenix that are not counted for in those other models. And I think that this calculator, as we get that online, will be very helpful for you to truly measure your ROI on an investment in solar on the rooftop. Now, you might have heard about balcony or plug-in solar. And these are these compact solar setups that are primarily designed for people that live in apartments or condos where they don't have access to a rooftop or they want to be able to take it with them. It'll only reduce your utility bills. It does not work if the utility is down. Now, currently, these are not legal in Arizona. Utah, I think, is the first to have allowed those to be used, but other states are considering those to make them legal. But there are limits on the power that they can provide. Might be a good option for if you got an off-grid cabin or workshop where it's very difficult to pull power to, and you only need intermittent use of that. But interesting development going on, and we'll help you keep an eye on those as the time goes forward. Our current feeling is that they're not quite ready for prime time. They don't have UL approval. Of course, they aren't legal in Arizona. So if you self-install one of those, you'll be a pioneer, if you will. How about the help from the state of Arizona for paying for these changes? Efficiency Arizona has got a great program. Uh, over the next, well, month and a half is when it's going to last. But it is an on-the-spot rebate for many of the households in Arizona to purchase these units, either heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, electric cooking appliances, and do those energy efficiency improvements that we talked about earlier from the energy audit. And it's really a great process. You apply for the rebate online, they'll review it, find you a retail interest form, and then you get a coupon in the mail that you take into the store. Now, right now, only the Lowe's and the Allen Home Comfort stores in Phoenix handle this program, but they do deliver to Tucson. But beware, of all the changes in the federal rules on these types of rebates. Most of these programs for Efficiency Arizona are going to change effectively September 1st. So we've got about a month, 5 weeks maybe. So get your application in as soon as possible so that you can take advantage of this program from Efficiency Arizona. Both the city of Tucson and Pima County have programs. Um, Technicians for Sustainability and SERI nonprofits, they have the Solar Empowerment Program. Check it out. Those are really good programs. City of Tucson and Pima County both have a weatherization uh, program for energy audit and these energy efficiency improvements. And for emergency situations, there's also programs that will provide urgent and no-cost repairs for people, for seniors, and things that have accessibility restrictions. So contact the City of Tucson Housing Repair Program and the Pima County program to find out more information about that type of assistance. And what kind of assistance can you get from TEP? They mentioned earlier the virtual home assessment, that's free. And you can see a range of different types of rebates that are available depending on what the program is that you're doing. Now, this is a lot for you to try to take notes on. So I've made these slides available on the website, and I'll provide you a link to that later on so that maybe if you want to take a look at this page or other pages of the slide set, you'll be able to do that. That's a lot to try to take notes on if you've got something that you're interested in on this slide or the others. And what can we do from Go Electric Arizona? Well, our website has got a ton of good information. If you want me or one of the other coaches to show up at your front door and do an in-home uh, consultation, take a look at some of your equipment and your appliances, we can do that and walk through that whole environment with you. We can also do it virtual, either Zoom or phone calls. As I mentioned, you can download this slide set from the website. And also, if you wanted to join us as a coach, if you're already well down the path of making your own home energy efficient, we'd love to have you join the team and help us provide that kind of service to other people. And again, I mentioned this rooftop solar collector that's being developed, and it does take into account more of the intricacies of southern Arizona and batteries that you won't find with more of the larger scale commercial models. Well, let me just wrap up by saying, hey, going electric, there's a lot to like. You can save some money. Of course, you're reducing your emissions, reduce your dependency on TEP if you've got rooftop solar and batteries. It's an improvement in your health, and it just makes life more convenient, fun, and enjoyable. And you're helping the rest of the world fight climate change by doing our small part. Each of us collectively makes a difference. And there's my contact information. I'm Gordon Nuttall, GORDONNU at gmail.com. And I think now, Dan, we're ready for any comments or questions that came up in the chat.
I think we are, Gordon, and thank you so much. That was a great presentation. And I do actually, before we start going into a couple of comments that were made in the chat, I did want to ask you a clarifying question about Efficiency Arizona. When you were talking about the changes coming at the end of September, were those ones that were already programmed in from the OBB, or are you referring to the Department of Energy's recent program notice 26-2 that went into effect in May and essentially shut down half of the Efficiency Arizona program or all of the Efficiency America programs?
Well, I think it's the earlier one, and they're just clarifying what are the criteria that they use for shutting down. And it appears that they will continue some programs related to if you are not changing the energy source.
Right.
So if you have an existing heat pump and you're replacing with a new heat pump, they still have rebates available for that. But if you're replacing a furnace, gas-fired furnace, with a heat pump, those benefits or those rebates are no longer applied. That's my understanding in a nutshell. But yeah, there's a
Yep.
lot going on there, and it seems like every day there's another unfortunate announcement. And that was one of those things that giving us a call or asking for a free consult, we might be able to review your individual situation.
Yep. That is that. I just want to clarify that because we actually just sent with the CCES, we just sent a memorandum to mayor and council this past month asking them to reach out to Attorney General Mays to see about joining in on a lawsuit against the Department of Energy because, yeah, they essentially changed the conditions of the existing HEAR program, which was the one that household electrification was and appliances were covered
Yeah,
under. And yeah, they took out a lot of things. They took out things about, um, low income support and things like that. But then the significant one was the one you mentioned. They basically banned any fuel switching. So if you've got a gas stove, you can't put in an electric stove. If you have a gas heater, you can't put in a heat pump. And so it's just ridiculous. I mean, you can still get insulation help, you can still get an energy audit, they can still seal your ducts, but you can't switch fuels. And I think that's what a lot of us want to do. We had applied for it, unfortunately, right before that notice came out. So the only thing we've received anything from Efficiency Arizona on is oh yeah, we've got a contractor who can come out and look at your ducts, so that's about the only thing that they seem to be doing right now.
yeah,
So yeah, by all means, I will try and put in a link to that program notice here for people that want to look into that. And please do reach out to your, well, I know probably a lot of you have the same representative I do, who's not going to be very helpful, but yes, please do reach out to your representatives and your senators and, say something has to be done about that because they're basically violating the law that Congress passed. So that's kind of the problem. Yeah.
yeah.
So Dwayne is saying
Well,
you
thanks
can
for
change your
taking the
fuel
initiative
source.
on that, Dan. We do need to influence our legislations to
Yeah.
get back to what we had before, at least, to retain what they promised us.
Yep, exactly. Because it clearly that the department, any executive department, does not have the power to change the letter of the law, and the letter
Yeah.
of the law was very clear. So yeah, let me go ahead and read a couple of the comments that have come in, and then I'm going to open it up to any questions anyone may have. The first thing, when you're talking about heat pump water heaters, Dwayne did point out that condensed water collected in a heat pump water heater can drain outside or into a drain, just like an emergency valve on a standard, now old style water heater. I know where my water heater is. There's a drain in the floor, and also that's where the air handler is, or I guess like you said, it's actually the condenser or switches most the indoor unit for our heat pump. I never know what to call that thing, is there as well. And it has the pump that sends the water outside. So we actually are able to collect it in a a rainwater jug and use it
Ah,
because it's nice, clean water. So
good
don't
for
pass
you.
up that
That
water.
I should mention that again. Yeah, it's a great way to collect some water that you would normally just have in the air.
Yeah, it's because there's a lot of it during this time of year. That thing is generating a lot of water because there's a lot of condensation building up on those elements, and so there's a lot of water to take advantage of. Trace did mention that houses built post World War II to about 62 usually have 60 amp service and 3 circuits. I know that was probably what our house originally had until we upgraded. There are over 56,000 in Metro Tucson. So if they haven't been upgraded, they will have to be. I will point out that was something that I believe Efficiency Arizona will still cover actually as part of putting in another more efficient electric appliance if you happen to be lucky enough to already have an electric appliance. So that is one of the things that we'll cover.
Good point, Trace. Yeah. So again, if you don't know what a 60 amp circuit looks like in your home, give us a call at Go Electric Arizona or come to our website and ask for a free consult, and we'll walk the property with you and see what you got and what you might need.
Yep. And then, yes, I totally get being surprised by things. I did just put a comment in. We have a mini fridge that's out in our patio. That thing was using an obscene amount of power. I couldn't believe how much power that thing was using. Obviously, we don't have it plugged in anymore, but yeah, it's funny. Just little things like that can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I was surprised in my own when I put in that Emporia monitoring system. I go, really? Are you sure that my pump of the water is costing me $10 a day? That's a purely discretionary use.
Yep. Bruce mentioned the Efficiency Arizona program is continuing. Yeah, I didn't say it had been shut down. Um, but unfortunately, there are parts of it that are no longer available. You should apply. I mean, apply for everything you want to do. And maybe if there are any policy changes, like someone sues and wins against the Department of Energy, they will already have your application in place for doing a fuel switch, because that is what the law allows for. But if you, yeah, I'm not sure. Bruce did say, well, yeah, I guess you could get approved for a heat pump if your air conditioner has died, although the way the law is written, it's like um, you can't, it's not really clear about it. It definitely says in like new installations that if there's already a gas heater there, that they can leave the gas heater there and also put a heat pump in. So yeah, there's some weird things, but yeah, basically it's saying if you have as we do, like we really want to replace our gas stove, which we're going to do anyway. We just were hoping to get a little cash help with it. Um, and Dwayne pointed that out too. You can change fuel source. I mean, personally, you can. You just can't get the federal assistance. So you're not going to get that money. Um, and do definitely, Bruce again pointed out, please apply ASAP. And panel upgrades, yes, that was the same thing I said. Panel upgrades are possible under the Efficiency Arizona program because it'd be for electrical improvements. Um, a lot of these are comments. I don't see many questions so far, but I will open it up to questions in a minute. Solar ovens. Christy mentioned solar ovens are good for summer use in Arizona, just not during monsoons because yeah, you got a little too much cloud cover. I also found out we do have a solar oven too. I mean, it can be good for something, same place you'd use a crock pot. You kind of have to stick it out there in the morning. And then by dinner time, hopefully your stuff will be done because it does take a while. And so, yeah, I don't know if that's Dwayne. Do you want to? I don't want to put you on the spot, but you said if you get it done soon enough, you can still get the benefit. My understanding from the way that the program notice was written is effective at the end of May. Those changes went into effect. So, and Bruce, yes, you can get weatherization program help from Efficiency Arizona. That's for sure. But
I would defer to Bruce on it. He's more up to date on the particulars than I am.
okay, I know Bruce. Do you have anything to kick in on that? Because my
Yeah, I
understanding
mean,
was,
yeah,
yeah.
basically none of those things, Dan, none of those changes have gone into effect. They're actually scheduled to take effect September 1st, and they're encouraging people to apply by August 1st, which obviously is coming up really fast because the current change thing says you have to have an approved application by September 1st. So that means turn it in, be approved in terms of income qualifications, and on some parts of it, having a contractor come and check it out. So it's really, really important that people that are interested in this program apply immediately. The application is really straight ahead. It's online. You
Yep.
go to efficiencyarizona.com, and on the first page it says apply. You click that, and you have to submit online either a tax return that shows your income or paycheck stubs. And if you qualify, then you get the ball rolling. And the Governor's Office of Efficiency of Resiliency is running the program, and they said that when they had a press release the other day that said they've brought online a whole bunch of contractors like last week and this week to try to get things processed in this short time frame to get things done. So again, if you have any interest in any of these programs, you should apply for it immediately online. Get your income information in, get the ball rolling, and hopefully you can get something approved by the end of August, which is when the new regs kick in. And as Dan said, there are some lawsuits about it, but I think it's hard to know that if anything's going to happen or not. Don't take a chance. Go ahead and apply right now.
Yep. So, but when you're saying that September, because I mean, I've unfortunately read that program notice multiple times. It said it went into effect immediately. So, where did the September date come from?
Well, there was a 3-month lag period in it that said that it applied to applications that were received after 3 months after the effective date, which was in June. And so in May. So then you had the 3 months were June, July, and August. And so the date when the changes really go into effect are September 1st, but it's really approved applications have to be submitted for reimbursement by September 1st. So the governor's office folks are really encouraging people to get stuff in by August 1st. So that's the deadline. So nothing's really changed yet, but all the things you mentioned, Dan, and Dwayne also, and Gordon, all those changes are going to take effect for applications that are not approved by that August deadline and come in after September 1st. Exactly what they are. There's apparently been a bunch of clarifications from DOE that are going back and forth with the state folks. So there's a little murkiness, but we know that in September, on September 1, things are going to change, and that means you got to have everything done before that. So get going.
Yeah, I would say do it tonight if you can. There is one other thing you do have to, depending on what you're wanting to get upgraded, you may have to take some photographs of things like the equipment that you want to have replaced. So be aware of that. You may, like, if you want to get a replacement for your gas range, you're going to have to take a picture of the nameplate that says what the brand is and those kind of things. So just be aware. It's not just one thing you can fill out online. You also have to put a couple of pictures in there if you're asking for help on certain things. But it's still pretty easy. I mean, we did ours in just a period of about an hour or so. So yeah, go do it for sure. Okay, Stuart, you have your hand up.
Yes. Thank you, Gordon. It's really delightful to listen to not only the words you say, but the way you say them. And it's very upbeat and clear as well. I'm thinking of a conversation I had yesterday with a woman I met out shopping. She told me how they love Prius cars, and then she said what she's doing right now is she's looking into something called Joseph's Well or St. Joseph's Well, some such name. And what she said is it's some kind of thing that you maybe put in the ground, and maybe it's a bit of a dome or tower looking kind of thing that will give you up to 30 gallons of water a day. I said, gee, that sounds a lot like a heat pump. And so we were musing over that. And I wonder whether, Gordon, you've heard of this thing? And if so, is this a good way to be collecting that water, or is there more than one could be doing?
Well, that's a new piece of information for me. It sounds like it's a heat pump dehumidifier or something similar to that. Dwayne or Bruce, you got more information about that?
I don't know anything about that, Gordon. I mean, Stuart, obviously, we would be happy to talk to somebody about it. I don't think it falls into the regular list of things that would be covered under the Efficiency Arizona program. So it's not in line with that. But sure, there's a lot of other ideas that people have come up with to save energy. And sure, we'd be happy to. We always like to learn from people we talk to, and I think that'd be great to get her to go to the website and give us the information, and one of our coaches can talk to her and find out what the deal is. And if it sounds like a good program, then we'll be happy to share it with other folks.
Thank you.
Good. And Christy, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that several of my neighbors here use a small solar-driven, it collects water through condensation, makes a bit of noise, but I know 2 or 3 people that got them for nothing. And I could try to send that to you guys later. Does not collect 30 gallons, Stuart, but more like a couple gallons a day, maybe even more now during monsoons. But it is free water condensation driven by solar, and it has a small fan noise.
Yeah, that sounds closer to what she described. It's some kind of it was solar panel powered, and but who knows whether they're exaggerating what they can get.
It sounds like so is it an air capture system? I know that they actually use those
Yes,
even in like the
yes,
Sahara Desert, which,
exactly.
you'd say, wow, there's nothing there. But yeah, they're able to collect some quantity
Yes,
of drinking water from these things. So yeah,
yeah.
it can be done.
A water collector versus a solar collector.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Trying to see. Dwayne, I think you already answered that question. Mary Gresham was asking, she has relatives in Phoenix and Vegas. Do those cities have equivalents to what you do? And I see Dwayne answered for Nevada at least. And then he also said that there's a person he knows in Phoenix. So I don't know, Gordon, if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
Go ahead, Dwayne.
No, I'll just yeah, it's tentative. It's not somebody who we have vetted for service yet. So I will deal directly with Mary on that situation.
Sounds good. Okay. Stephen.
I was just wondering if that system that Stuart was describing was something like a geothermal pump, but also collecting humidity.
I've never heard
You're
of
muted,
that.
Stuart.
Sorry, I wished I'd asked him more questions. And it was in a parking lot on a hot day, and we're keeping it kind of short. So I'll have to look into that a bit.
Geothermal is oftentimes used in other parts of the country for their heat pump,
Yep.
rather than have an air source heat pump that exchanges heat with the air. You can easily have a heat pump that exchanges heat with the geo heat underneath the surface. They're more expensive, of course, because you're drilling and laying pipe down in the soil. But in some parts of the country, they can be very efficient, maybe a longer term payback than air source. But yeah, geothermal heat pumps are well known in other parts of the country, not so much here.
I just saw recently that the state of Arizona is looking at they got a grant, putting out a grant, or they got a grant, I don't know which it was, to look at large scale geothermal for the state. They identified a number of spots within the geology of Arizona that they think are pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, makes a lot of sense in certain spots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Steve,
And that's
those remote, as I understand it, those grants the state is applying for were for large-scale geothermal power generation.
right.
And that's a little different than what we've been talking about, which with air source heat pumps on an individual residential or building level. So it's the same idea, but it's a much bigger scale project than what Gordon was just talking about, the ground source heat pumps that would be used to produce heating or cooling for a small scale setup.
Okay, and I don't remember this exactly offhand, so Bruce, you may have it on the top of your head. Sandra asked what the income parameters are for Efficiency Arizona.
Yeah, I don't have the details on the top of my head, Dan, but
I can give a summary. So it's the same metrics used by HUD. If you have if your household income is 80% of the area median income, then you get to qualify for 100% assistance through this state program. If your income is 150% of the area median income, which means that's by far most people, then you
Yep.
qualify for half of the full amount or up to half of the full amount.
and those numbers are actually quite generous in my view.
Yep.
If I remember correctly, a household of two um, could have an income up to, I believe, roughly $110,000, $115,000 per year. I may be off on that a bit, but it's in the $100,000 per year. So um, a lot of folks are eligible for this program for some assistance. And
Yep.
the lower your income is, the more assistance you're eligible for, as Dwayne just mentioned.
Yep. Yeah, that was, yeah, we were eligible. And, I mean, we certainly, at least last year, had an income that I didn't think was going to allow us to apply, but yeah, we should be eligible for 50% support. So yeah, it's definitely, again, go ahead and apply. I mean, the worst I can say is tell you can't get anything. And they did already put us in touch with somebody to do some air duct sealing and evaluate our insulation. So, I mean, you can get some value out of it, even if they don't allow the fuel switching.
And if you need to know the specific dollar limits, as Dwayne mentioned, you can go to our website and you'll find those numbers. So they vary by family size. And if
Yep.
you're not in Pima County, they're different numbers. But for Pima County, those numbers for a different family size and whether you fit the low income category or the middle income category are available on the GoElectricAZ website.
Excellent. Yeah, and those are based on the HUD income values. So that's what they usually use for those kind of programs. So
And
yeah,
and not to, I mean, it's sort of obvious, but for anybody who's getting school lunch, food stamps, any of those kinds of already determined eligibility for low income, those families are automatically eligible without other proof.
This is Sandy. I still have a question for further clarification. It said early in the presentation that these applications are only available through a couple of businesses in Phoenix.
No.
What was that all about?
Oh gosh, I'm searching to see where I might have said that.
well,
Was it really
it's
Yeah,
for the
only?
Lowe's.
contractors. Yeah,
Yes, I believe the Lowe's in Tucson also are available, but that other source, I believe, maybe only has a location in Phoenix, but there are locations in Tucson, if I'm not mistaken, the Lowe's at least, where those purchases can be made.
yeah,
So
and
Does
those are
that
for,
mean that you have to make your purchases through Lowe's?
yes, they'll give you a coupon to use at Lowe's for the appliances. And they also have a contractor they work with because this is the one that they just connected us with, like for things like insulation or something like that. They have a contractor they work with that they will have reach out to you and do the work for you. So it is limited that way. It's unfortunate. It's not like you can go shop around and find the best deal. You have to work with the one that they have a contract with.
But I will
thank you.
say I've never dealt with this Allen's outfit in Phoenix, but I spoke to them and they said they consider themselves to be a smaller, locally based, locally owned alternative to Lowe's and Home Depot, and they do deliver to Tucson. So they have a website and you can talk to them on the phone, and if you like the products they have and you qualify and you get the coupon, you could use it with them. And you need to arrange someone to do the installation of the equipment in Tucson, but you could buy the equipment from them using the coupon and getting
Yep.
the discount the same as you would with a Lowe's in Tucson. So
Yep.
you at least have two choices on those.
Okay, and you have to have the coupon before you have purchased anything.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And they actually list that when you do your application, they're going to ask you do you want to, and I think it only applies to appliances. I mean, it's been a little while since I filled that
No,
out, but
that's right. There's sort
yeah,
of two tracks. One is contractor based and one is walk out the door with a order for an appliance. So if you're buying a
yep,
water heater, a stove, or a heat pump, you're going to get a coupon. If you're dealing with the other things Gordon mentioned, like um, in duct sealing or insulation in your home or electrical panel upgrades, those things with
yep,
a contractor, that's not a coupon. That's a deal thing where the discount you're eligible for is subtracted from the initial bid by the contractor. So there's no limitations. You don't have to deal with Lowe's or this outfit in Phoenix for that, but you do have
yep.
to deal with a state licensed contractor um, that has been approved by the folks that run the program.
And you get a list of those from their website?
Yeah, they'll usually assign a contractor to you, and
Yep.
then if you want to get a second quote, you can look at their list and get a second quote from somebody else. The main thing is because time's so tight right now, it's get your application in with the documentation that like Dan mentioned, and then like he was talking about a contractor helping him with the duct insulation. So you'll get a contractor assigned and they'll get a quote and you'll have to approve it. And that will include the discount that you're entitled to under the program. If you want to get a second quote from somebody, in the past, I would encourage people to get a second or third quote. And now I'd say, get the ball rolling and see if you like the contractor. And if you think the bid's okay, get a second quote. But make sure you get the ball, going now or you're going to miss the boat.
And it
Yep.
has to be installed by September?
No, the application has to be fully approved by September 1st. And that's why the state folks that are running this program are saying, get people to apply by August 1st. So there's time to process the application, get the contractor
Okay.
involved in everything, because it's always at least a couple of weeks to get that done. So the closer you get to that absolute September 1st deadline, you don't really have any power or control over how long it's going to take for the contractor to get the paperwork in and get approval, but it's state approved by September 1st, which takes at least a week and more likely a couple of weeks. So start now.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And if you already had already been approved for something like replacing your gas stove or something like that before this all was kicking in, doesn't
Right.
affect that. So it's grandfathered for things, even if the work hasn't been done yet.
And even if you miss the deadline, there's still a bunch of things that you might be able to do. So first deal with the deadline and get whatever you can under the current system. And then if you don't make that cutoff, then see what you can do after that. Don't throw up your
Yep.
hands and say, oh my gosh, I couldn't get anything in until later in August because I, was disorganized or I was in San Diego on the beach or whatever. So.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, bottom line, it's probably, just like we missed the federal tax credit for putting in our solar and storage from Technicians for Sustainability, but I'm still glad we did it, even though we're not going to get any tax refund on it because, we're still saving money and we are still not buying as much power from TEP. I may have to add a little bit more battery, to be honest, because we use a lot right now this time of year. It's like it doesn't that 10 kilowatt hours doesn't quite make it through the night every night. But yeah, it's totally worth doing it. Even, if there's any way you can, I would definitely look into doing it, even if you can't get the Efficiency Arizona rebate. Gordon, I did have one question for you since I don't see any other questions right now. You did mention about replacing your door, and I was wondering what your thoughts were about just doing some additional weather stripping, or if it's better to replace the door altogether, because I know in our house, our front door and our back door both leak. And so I'm just wondering what the best approach is to that.
Well, yeah, for your exterior doors, definitely make sure that threshold is snug and any insulation around the edges, of course, are snug and new, not
Yep.
cracked, dried out. The heat on the western facing doors is uh, really tough. And
Yep.
so definitely replace any insulation around the perimeter of the door. But if the door itself is a hollow core door or, something that's not air, doesn't have a good thermal profile, yeah, you want to think about replacing that door, especially those on the west side where the heat exchange is the most severe.
Yep. Yeah,
The
good thought.
thresholds are underlooked, I think. Fairly easy to remedy. Oftentimes, you just use a screwdriver, adjust the height, and you can fix most of those gaps. But, even for do-it-yourselfers, replacing a threshold with a new rubberized seal will save you a ton of money.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Trace, you have a
Yeah,
question?
quick question. When you say replace the door, do you mean just the slab or the whole frame and everything?
Oh, just a slab.
Okay.
As long as the framing is also watertight or airtight. Go outside and look at the caulking around the framing material. A lot of times those are peeled away from the
Yep.
backing, or the insulation is cracked and dried out. Definitely start there. The outside framing, make sure it's as airtight as you can visually check, and before you go replacing the door. But you do both if you need to. But good point, Trace. Make sure that the framing itself is airtight also.
Yep. Yes, indeed. Okay, does anyone else have any questions or comments before we let Gordon go?
I guess one last comment. If you get somebody to hang a door, get somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yes.
It's a specialized job.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that from experience. I tried hanging my own door. That was a mistake. So yeah, get somebody who knows what they're doing.